I will move right on to the next presentation. The title that was given to this presentation is Evaluating Pavements Before Pavement Preservation. But the title I wanted to talk about was Pavement Maintenance Before Preservation. So again, as the speaker at the podium, I am taking the liberty to modify it slightly, but I think we'll cover a lot of the same ground in doing so. And maybe this is what was originally intended. This presentation is based on some work that we did in a NCHRP synthesis. So synthesis, for those of you who aren't familiar, is a short study that looks at and reports on current practice on a topic of interest. This topic came out of TRB's Pavement Maintenance Committee under Anita Bush's from Nevada's DOT under her direction. And the idea was what are the practices in terms of applying pavement maintenance before preservation? So there was an understanding that preservation quite often is not applied to a road before that road is restored to a condition where the preservation treatment will perform properly. So the study was intended to look at what practices are followed to bring pavements to a condition where the pavement preservation treatment performance is likely to be most successful. So the typical format in a study such as this is to do a literature review and to do a survey of practice. So to reach out to the appropriate agencies, in this case, state highway agencies. No, I don't think any local agencies were contacted, and get their feedback on a number of questions and follow up with some of them with additional interviews and so on. And then a number of case examples or case studies were developed. We got input from a number of Southeast agencies, Georgia, Kentucky in particular, and a few others on their practices. Some of the underlying thinking was that we could always use better guidance about how to do pavement preservation. We recognize that pavement preservation success is a function of a lot of different factors, and we're all familiar with selecting the right project, a good candidate for pavement preservation, placing the treatment properly under the right conditions, having a skilled crew, using good materials, and so forth. But one factor that maybe is understudied is the extent to which we do the proper pre-treatment preparation of the road in order to ensure good performance of the preservation treatment. So that's what this study in particular was focusing on. And we wanted to look at maintenance and surface preparation activities, I'll explain those in a moment, to document what agencies were doing, how did they determine the need to do those actions, what techniques did they use to complete the actions, and how did they track, or did they track where they did this? I'm going to present some of the findings from that study and then conclude with a quick identification of some of the knowledge gaps and recommendations that we came up with for furthering our careers and doing even more research. The definitions we used, for maintenance in particular, and I don't want to try and define maintenance overall, but for this particular purpose, we were looking at correcting pavement defects such as cracks and areas needing patching. For surface preparation, we were looking at steps taken to improve smoothness, geometrics, and so on. You can read that typically through milling or micromilling or filling ruts. Then we just combine these to talk about maintenance. So if I use the term maintenance without saying surface preparation, the intent is that we're combining those two, recognizing that they're different. Adriana gave a presentation on some of the NCAT activities, I think on the first day, And I think the work they've done there does as much to highlight the importance of this topic as anything. And in fact, these slides, these images come from information that she provided. And they show for Lee Road, for the low volume road, the test sections that they put down, the performance of a microsurface on the left without crack sealing prior to placement of the microsurface, and on the right with crack sealing. And I think as good as anything else, this just shows, while neither may be perfect, the section of the pavement that received, that had the crack sealed before the microsurface went on, looks better than the section that didn't. And that's the basic concept that when you do the right maintenance before placing a surface treatment, you're going to get better performance of the surface treatment. Some of the findings, we looked at the most common maintenance treatments, and we included rigid pavements, so that's shown at the bottom of this. But the most common maintenance treatments on flexible pavements were crack sealing and filling, partial depth patching, full depth patching, and rut filling. And then we go to grade and slope corrections, drainage repairs, and others. Again, the focus is on crack sealing and patching for flexible pavements. We asked agencies how they made the decision about whether or not they need to do maintenance on these roads, particularly linked to the application of a surface treatment or a preservation treatment. And you can see the answers here. 33 said the need for that maintenance was scoped as part of the treatment design. 29 said the maintenance needs were assessed or acted on locally before the preservation treatment. 14 said that the activities were linked to specific preservation treatments. And what we saw that meant was some of the agencies had a specification for, let's say, a chip seal that said, prior to the placement of the chip seal, thou shalt seal cracks, and would give guidance about how to do that. Thou shalt patch, and give guidance to do that. Others might say, do necessary repairs, leaving it open to interpretation what was necessary and what the repairs were. Some, a small number had it as an agency policy decision. 5 said that maintenance actions and pavement preservation treatments are not linked at all, which might be a little scary that they don't consider the two together. This photo shows one of the conditions that one might be evaluating prior to placing a preservation treatment. It's a little low resolution because John gave it to me in low resolution, but that's okay. The things I would wonder about when I look at this, so first of all, I hope nobody thinks that a preservation treatment placed on top of this would perform satisfactorily. But the things I would wonder about were, did these delaminations occur before the project was scoped? And if so, how are they going to deal with it now that the delaminations have occurred? Is there a mechanism when you see this? What are your options? Do you come in and patch that? Of course, you recognize to the traveling public that thin surface delamination is called a pothole to them, and they're going to want you to patch that. But you might be better off, if this treatment is starting to come up, you might be better off removing it completely. And then I would wonder, okay, how is that being handled? Is the agency going to do it? Is the contractor going to do it? Was it part of his plans, or is it something that needs to be added? Another question we asked in our survey was, how do you time the relationship between the maintenance activity and the application of the surface treatment? About half of the respondents, a little bit more, said that there's no set timing. The maintenance can occur anytime. 12 said it depends on the treatment. 7 said the maintenance must be completed a specified amount of time ahead of preservation. Looking at those time intervals, you might have specify less than 6 months, between 1 and 2 years, and other. That's just a recognition that some of the maintenance activities, take for example crack sealing, can impact how the surface treatment is going to perform. So we need to be aware of that and take into consideration the relationship between what maintenance treatments might be applied and what surface treatment is being applied and how they might interact. For example, a road with a lot of crack sealant on it, you might be concerned about the age of that crack sealing. You might be concerned that it's an overband rather than a flush fill, and depending on the treatment, how that might impact the performance, either in terms of ride or bleed through of the surface treatment that's placed on top of it. Who decides that maintenance is needed? So again, out of 45 respondents, 38 said that decision is made locally, 18 said it's made by the central office. You can see by adding up those numbers that they were allowed to check multiple boxes. One said the contractor decides. I don't know if that scares anybody. One said consultants decide. No comment. And other. Another example of, looking at a pavement that might be a candidate for a surface treatment, or even if it's not a good candidate for pavement preservation, might be a pavement that's going to be receiving a surface treatment. Just sort of asking yourself, what treatment would you do to this before you put on a preservation treatment or a surface treatment? Would you do nothing? Would you seal the cracks? Would you flush fill the entire surface to fill the cracks and then put the surface treatment on? There's a lot to be decided. That involves going back to, okay, who looks at the road, who makes that decision, and it can have a significant impact, of course, on the cost of the surface treatment or the preservation treatment and its subsequent performance. So in terms of funding the maintenance activities prior to pavement preservation, 35 said that they use agency funds. A real interesting response here was 18 said that they use federal funds. And of course, federal funds have not traditionally been used for pavement maintenance. But if it's being done in conjunction with pavement preservation, where federal funds are being used by many agencies, you may see some use of federal funding to do crack sealing and patching as part of the overall preservation contract. And 14 said it depends. Just another look at a road that isn't in terrible condition outside of the wheel paths. I don't know if you can see it there, but in the wheel paths you've got some rutting, you've got pretty bad fatigue cracking. Again, an agency might decide or might have selected this project for pavement preservation, and then the question is what maintenance gets done before this gets covered up, and who does it? And certainly something, given that most of the surface treatments that we talk about in pavement preservation are thin, we know that if we place a preservation treatment directly on this, it will not perform well. We asked about who does the maintenance work before preservation, and we had two cases, one where the preservation treatment was being applied by the agency, that's shown here, and the other was if the preservation work was being done by contract. So if the agency was applying the preservation treatment, 19 of the respondents said they also did the maintenance with in-house forces. 5 said that they would do it under a specific preservation contract. 1 said they would do it with a statewide contract that goes around and does these treatments. And then there's some other approaches and does not apply. If the work is being done by contract, 17 said they would do the maintenance work under the same contract. 6 said their agency forces would go out and take care of the maintenance. So they would deliver a road that was ready for preservation by doing the maintenance, the preparation work themselves. 6 said it would be done under a separate contract. 11 used some other approach. We asked if the maintenance needs were always addressed. Let's say you've gone out and done the evaluation or show up just prior to placement of the preservation treatment and identify a need. Is that need always addressed with maintenance activities before the preservation treatment is placed. Yes was said by 18, no by 26, and then given the reasons, you can see here there's a nice range of explanations for the no's, why the work wasn't done if it wasn't always done. We also wondered about tracking. So let's say you wanted to understand the performance of pavements where the needed maintenance was done in comparison to the performance of pavements where the needed maintenance wasn't done before the preservation treatment was applied. So we asked them, did they track where they did maintenance so that they could look at that later on? 11% said no, they don't track it. The rest, shown here, explain the different ways in which they did track maintenance. Some of them amount to pretty much not tracking. Getting to the end, some of the knowledge gaps that we identified, there were certainly links between specific pavement conditions, specific pavement distresses that required maintenance, the application of preservation treatments over pavements with those conditions. We saw that there wasn't a consensus on how much time needed to pass between the application of a maintenance treatment and placing the subsequent preservation treatment. And a good example is crack sealing. Some would say, if you seal cracks, wait a month, wait 3 months, wait 1 year, wait 2 years before you come in and place the preservation treatment. And some would have no requirement at all. Seal cracks the day before you come in and resurface over it. And there was a gap in the documentation of the effect of maintenance on the performance of preservation treatments. Our suggestions for future research are summarized here. I'm not going to read these to you. One of the things, the second bullet, one of our recommendations was better identifying the point at which maintenance before preservation isn't really cost effective. I mean, that's the point at which preservation isn't cost effective either, but when is the treatment just, it doesn't matter what you do, in a year the road is going to look the same, and you might sort of limit the amount of money you throw into that pit. We're always making this recommendation to better track what you do on the road so that your different management systems have access to that information, and you can model your network performance better in the long run. That's repeated here as well. Thank you for letting me give these two distinct separate presentations, and I don't know if there are any questions. I can try and answer them. Thank you.
Well, let's give a hand of applause to David. Thanks, David.
The preceding was produced by the National Center for Pavement Preservation. More information can be found on the web at pavementpreservation.org. Additional support provided by Michigan State University.